Hi everybody, that was loud, sorry. Welcome back. Welcome to the afternoon session on the Virtual Programmatic Day. I hope everyone's enjoyed their lunch. It gives me great pleasure to hand you over to Joanna Burton from SpotX, who's going to moderate this afternoon and take us through a load of great content and panels. So, Joanna is the Marketing Director for SpotX. Is that the right title? No? Joanna's going to correct the title because I just got it wrong, but it's awesome. And an industry is up for awards, so everyone vote for Joanna for Industry Personality of the Year on the Exchange Wire. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Simon, and thanks again to all the speakers from this morning, and of course to Ollie Gertz for moderating. So the second half of today's event is going to be talking about how data can be used effectively. Then we're going to have a deep dive into programmatic mobile and have a look at what the future holds for programmatic. What are the hot topics to watch out for? First of all, I'd like to introduce Josie Howard. She is the Head of Bidder Development at Oath. She has been in programmatic since 2014. She used to head up the data and targeting team at Microsoft. She's going to talk about how to use data effectively in programmatic, which is her sweet spot at the moment, having worked with buyers across the ecosystem for many years and working with all the third-party technologies at the moment. So, Josie, over to you, please.
Thank you. So marketers and publishers want access to more quality data to scale. But it is extremely difficult to put the right checks and balances in place to ensure that data is valid and reliable. But despite the risks, advertisers are increasingly reliant on data and modelling to target their campaigns and inform their creatives. And what we're seeing is the more data that's in the mix, the harder it is to parcel out the impact of each of those components, and the more important it is to know the provenance of whatever data set you're working with, and how that data set works together with all the other pieces. So the discussion points I'm going to cover today are to firstly understand the different types of audience data that are available, so primarily first party, second party and third party. Also how to use that data effectively and look at cross-device opportunities and challenge. Lastly, some key considerations that should be taken into account when running data-rich strategies. So to start with the understanding audience data, buy-side data refers to data that advertisers can access and use. So that's every time an interaction happens between a consumer and an advertiser at any level, some sort of data is created. And we'll start off by looking at first-party data. First-party data is really common, and it refers to any in-house data that's collected by the advertiser. An example of this are transactional or registration CRM data. So that could be online or offline, so Tesco or Carrefour.com, for example, from people who have made purchases at physical stores, from sales leads, and from database sign-ups. It also includes website data and campaign performance data from email, display, video, mobile direct mail, and print. Then CRM data can be onboarded with a data matching service, which has large databases of email addresses, phone numbers, and home addresses, and the cookies and digital IDs for reaching out to each of those people. The service finds the user from the advertiser's database and matches them with the cookie, and it's really important to make sure that this is done in a way that aligns with existing EU privacy legislation, of course. It's important to note that this data is never personally identifiable, so Josie Howard would become user 12345, for example. Knowledge derived from first-party data is really valuable, and it's also portable, but there must be a clear understanding of who has access to that data and the reasons for that access. And if you don't think through and implement sufficient data governance, there can be data leakage. And that is the term used when companies lose control over their data, but in programmatic, even the very action of sending a bid request can represent a leak, as there's so much data in that request. So it has to be handled super carefully. Third-party data is not usually sold exactly, but it's rented out. So as an advertiser, you pay every time it's activated in a campaign, normally via some kind of CPM cost model. So that's a cost per 1,000 impressions bought against that kind of data, or a percentage of a media spend. So the types of third-party data available include simple interest data, so that's categories of websites visited by a user, topics of the articles read by that user, so like an interest in motors, football, or house decoration. Secondly, there's purchase intent data, where a user searched for or viewed specific product on price comparison websites. So if they're looking for a car or a credit card comparison, for example. There's also geolocalization data, which is commonly used or rented out, and that includes GPS or Wi-Fi device data. So when you use your Wi-Fi in specific places like restaurants or on the tube or airports, etc., that Wi-Fi and GPS data is collected. Demographic data is the data declared that's normally available through a registration process. So when you have to give your age or gender at sign up for some kind of service. Sociographic data is also available, so that's family and professional status, the level of education you've got to, how much money you earn, and also data available from different kinds of social networks counts as part of the sociographic graph. Email subscription data is also used, and in some cases, some kind of email content. There's mobile application data and device type data. The problem with third-party data is that the lack of transparency within it and the fact that it's broadly available to all competitors of a specific advertiser mean that it's not necessarily differentiated. So that's a key area to watch out for with third-party. When we look at second-party data, that is easily defined as someone else's first-party data. So, for example, the publisher data about their audience. Second-party data can come from non-competing brands or data, and there's a huge amount of upskill in the amount of growth that's coming through second-party data in terms of spend. So a report from last year from Forrester shows that at present, second-party counts for about 24% of the market, which is behind first-party data at 41%. Second-party data will rise to about 29%, so a third by 2020, while the rest remain kind of static. And this growth is happening as brands and retailers recognise the value of their own data and the added value of sharing that data with select businesses that are aligned to their objectives as they grow. I'm now going to have a look at how to use all of that different data packages that you can buy, how to use that effectively. So advertisers, media agencies and media owners face a huge challenge here. There's a huge amount of data there, but at the same time, you want to use that in the right way to increase engagement with consumers and users in a personalised and effective way. Advertisers have more power now than ever before to ask about our overall campaign performance in real time, but also demand that each site they buy from be accountable for every impression served. And through the availability of first, second and third party data, advertisers can discover the true value of one impression and that it doesn't necessarily equal the value of the next or the one that went before. In order to decide which are the most effective data sources, the type of data, reach and granularity have to be taken into account. So if you look at branding campaigns, for example, the aim of those is to increase the awareness or affinity for a certain product in a defined audience, and that requires scalable data assets, but that also have high reach. Socio-demographic information such as age and gender, as well as income, are a classic choice for that, but more and more advertisers tend to address customised brand and audience segments. And the way that they do that is to build customer profiles that constantly track what you like, what you buy, how you buy it, and millions of other digital interactions are taken into account. The potential power of this is lost if marketers aren't tracking, segmenting, and revamping the message to match that audience. So in both cases, like data modeling techniques and data aggregation are totally important to achieve the necessary reach and to deliver the campaigns at large scale. Secondly, when we look at using data effectively, it's audience data that can enhance creativity. Technology is often used to spark creativity on one level or another. That only works if you ask the right questions of that data, and it can lead to new insights and new ideas, which can in turn lead to engaging advertising messages. First and second third-party data can be used to understand the wider interests of the audience segments, which in turn can be used to inform that campaign creative. The more savvy marketers as well can have a look at cluster analysis, which reveals distinct subgroups within audiences you can then re-message that example to. Thirdly, the campaign data around optimizing performance is crucial to use when you're looking at data programmatically. So with real-time campaign reports, advertisers can evaluate, obviously, the clicks, the impressions, and the actions in a certain amount of time, but also look at the optimal settings and mix across audience profiles, channels, inventory, and creative. There are different kinds of data that align best and can be used best for different tactics. So if you take CRM targeting, for example, you can reach known customers and re-engage them with product offers. It's a great way to increase frequency and conversions amongst really loyal customer bases. Everyone likes a cheeky 20% to reward their loyalty. Demographic data is used when audience insights can provide the advertiser with real-time information about age and income and lifestyle of the people who responded best to that advertising and build segments following off the back of that. Advertisers are able to use geographic data to utilize campaign metrics for geographic areas. So the most simple of this is at postcode level, and then adjust the campaign to areas that show the best campaign performance. Velocity targeting, which is used primarily for direct response campaigns, takes into account the user's frequency and recency of visit to the brand's website to either increase or decrease the user's exposure to advertising, and then adapt that message accordingly. And channels. Reviewing campaign channel by device type can show which type of ads perform best on which channel. This enables the budget to be optimized across a varying mix of channels. Publishers' campaign data is able to map the number of conversions against unique users for a specific time period. And this can be tracked back to create the whitelist of top performing publishers that can then be targeted again for the next round of creative. Moving on to cross-device targeting. In this complex digital world, today's customer can own not just one, but a host of connected devices, and this has opened up a wide range of business opportunities for advertisers. This also simultaneously compounds their ability to gain control of the sales funnel. Successful cross-measurement yields big benefits for advertisers and customers, and effective cross-device measurement does a few things. Firstly, it fuels more relevant experiences for the user, delivering the most useful message at the appropriate time, no matter what device they're connected to. It also provides a broader view of behaviour throughout the customer journey, allowing advertisers to look at advertising spend across an entire campaign rather than piecemeal across various different screens and formats that don't relate clearly to one another. It offers an essential step in eliminating silos that occur that we're all familiar with in digital media planning, and enables a smarter advertising and a better customer experience. This is made even more complex by the amount of connected devices that single device identifiers, such as cookies, can't really capture a full view of media touchpoints anymore. Not too long ago, cookies were absolutely indispensable for every part of online advertising, helping understand which ads had been viewed on which site, and which behavioural segment. But with non-cookie supported devices playing a really integral role in the lives of consumers, the dependency on cookies is rapidly losing strength. Advertisers can utilise two kinds of data to help accurately identify which screens belong to which users. There's deterministic data and probabilistic algorithms, and I'll mention the two and define each of them. So deterministic is literally data that can be determined, so that's verified as true. For example, a user logging through to Amazon, for example, will need to sign up using some kind of identifiable information. So every time the user then logs into Amazon in the future, the publisher will be able to use that deterministic data to recognize that user and be pretty sure that they know exactly who they are and what they've been buying. The probabilistic method of establishing some kind of user ID is a little bit more complex because it relies on algorithms to analyze pseudonymous data points to create some kind of statistical and probable matches between those devices. So it's not exact, but it's also seen as almost a second-class route to data. Deterministic is really the algorithm that drives most value and spend. Deterministic and probabilistic data is fed into a data management platform where consumers and the link between their devices are converted into some kind of actionable insight. These users are then accessible via bidders to advertisers who can retarget those consumers. Lastly, I'd like to address some key considerations when you use data programmatically. Number one, how are buyers using publisher and user data? I think there are some big considerations around this, and especially when exchange sellers are not perhaps as confident as they could be in the makeup of a particular segment. Transparency is really key here to align with campaign objectives. Without knowing the ingredients, it's really hard to judge the quality of some kind of segment. Ideally, the freedom to identify which data points would be used to create an audience, the freedom to merge data sets together, and also to know that there's a quality standard sitting behind it would be ideal when you start looking at how buyers are using publisher data. The IAB and the IAB Tech Lab are also in the midst of their own separate, but they are really closely related initiatives to develop data quality standards. This should help all the players in the ecosystem determine the quality of data used. Secondly, it's really worthwhile considering how you're being charged for the data that you're using as a buyer or an advertiser, and making sure that you're not being charged twice. Some exchanges are integrated with DMP, and their charging models can be opaque. First-party data is often added value or used to leverage more media spend by publishers. So understanding where the charging metrics are for both DMP technology, which is used to aggregate and normalize data sets, and also how media data segments that are first and third party are actually paid for. And also additional charges can surface at each level. So if you have a look at buyer tech level, there may be charges in there for DMP tech and data targeting, but also on the publisher side, data segments may be paid for by the publisher. An example of that is adding some kind of floor price, i.e. a deal ID mechanic, at the level of bid, or reducing the bid amount received by paying the data partner. So, for example, if Axiom's contract with a publisher requires a 10-cent per CPM payment, this could be deducted from the bid that's received by the SSP to pay that data provider. It's always really key to understand how that data is being paid for. Something interesting that's going to happen in terms of considerations around using data is that the predicted shift from second price to first price auctions will probably coincide with the shift to increased data transparency for everyone. With that greater transparency comes better data, more informed decisions from all parties, and more accurate pricing from each bidder. Lastly, I'd like to call out the limitations of scale, which is inherent in using data at every level programmatically. So that really is the balance of using scale and targeting to achieve your objectives. There are limitations to this, and it's a real balancing act. Recently, P&G brand officer Mark Pritchard said that the company was shifting its marketing spend actually away from Facebook targeted advertising, saying that that company had actually gone too narrow in its search for specific customer groups, and they weren't able to scale. So going forward, P&G are trying to achieve a balance of reach and precision with their programmatic strategy. Tight audience targeting is right for some brands, but less so for FMCG companies. Broadly, instead, data seems to play a bigger role. What's key is that the right message is delivered at the right time to the right channel, and that's why insight and data is so important. A report commissioned by DigiDay found that the majority of marketers, around 88%, feel forced at some level to choose between quality and scale when it comes to targeting programmatically. For many, there doesn't seem to be some kind of systematic approach to managing the two, but instead prioritization comes on a case-by-case basis, and this does depend on the client's objectives. The primary approaches used by marketers today to find quality and relevant inventory, so that's often achieved through private marketplaces and whitelisting, often fail to achieve adequate scale, so it's really worth bearing that in mind. Further complicating the issue, the most common definitions of quality do tend to rely on some kind of subjective criteria. To fill the gap, emphasis can be placed on getting the most accurate data and the right technology to connect the right content with the right audience at meaningful scale. Thank you.
That's brilliant, Josie. Thank you very much. Very insightful. If we have any questions, please do put your questions in the Q&A area on the Hangout, on the webinar, WebEx, forgive me. But I just wanted to ask a question. Do you have any examples, given that we're here with the IAB Europe, do you have any examples of how different countries across Europe are using data most effectively, and especially how to balance that targeting versus scale issue?
I think broadly when it comes to data, if you're talking about first party in particular, then I think there are some specific examples that have come out of Southern Europe that are really good in terms of mobile targeting. They've managed to achieve the locality issue with scale as well by operating with some of their key mobile providers to get first party data, which seems to have really taken off in that region specifically. So I would point to that as an example of how it's been used effectively. I think as the more data that is effectively harvested, people are getting really smart about using it. So that obviously has a key impact. What we've noticed with some of the data that's available through Flurry, for example, through app SDKs, we've noticed that you can build out really, really effective segments there. You might not be able to decision against them programmatically, but they can absolutely enforce the type of apps that you actually use for your targeting.
Excellent. Excellent. And I was particularly interested to hear about Wi-Fi and GPS data. How do you value the data when you talked us through the three different kinds?
It's a real challenge to do that. Ultimately, that does depend on the way that the publisher works as well. So you will have publishers that remunerate that data partner in a certain way. I think the challenge is that a lot of advertisers want the freedom to be able to take that publisher's data and to be able to decision on it independently from the media. And as a publisher, that's not necessarily in line with expectations of revenue growth. So there is an interesting way that that's becoming more and more prevalent. And I think licensing of data is a way that that's going to change and grow over time.
Excellent. Brilliant. Well, great to hear that. And I'm particularly interested to hear about mobile data in Southern Europe. So thank you very much, Josie. I'd like to now introduce our next speaker, who's going to be talking about mobile programmatic. So next up we have Andrew Buckman. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. Hello.
So Andrew is the MD of Sublime Skins. Formerly, he was the MD for EMEA of OpenX, and before that, he was at Trade Doubler as the COO, and he's worked at Criteo, Web Loyalty, and Yahoo as well, so pan-European background. Andrew, over to you to talk us through programmatic mobile.
Great, well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So, I'm actually going to be talking through the paper that was prepared by the IAB Europe. So, I wish I could take credit for a lot of the stuff that's in here, because this is particularly interesting. What we're seeing, so if we go on the first, we're talking about why we think programmatic is actually particularly apt for mobile today. And what we're seeing is that mobile is driving media consumption and usage, which is not a new thing. I mean, it's the joke that this should be the year of the mobile again is getting very old, because it is really becoming part of every consumer's daily and even hourly habits to actually consume content on the mobile. And so following that, it's actually driving advertising spend a lot more. In 2016, the IAB Europe AdX benchmark report showed that mobile display grew by almost 53%. And on the global landscape, there's emerging markets which are developing really strongly, and they're becoming really mobile-first markets, like in Asia and in Africa, for example. And we saw earlier today that mobile display was the most, in inverted commas, programmatic format. And this is according to the latest IAB European Programmatic Market Sizing Report. But what we've seen also is that the execution of programmatic mobile for those both on the buy and the sell sides is not as straightforward as it has been when all the traffic was actually coming from desktops. With a plethora of operating systems, browsers, and app stores, it's taken the industry quite a while to understand the best ways to build and deploy campaigns for a mobile audience, when the best practices around the management of reach, frequency, and attribution have had to be learned all over again for this brand new environment. So that said, many have actually mastered mobile and are actually doing the job really well. And they're now mining the tangible return on investment that this new level of engagement is actually affording them. Never before has there been a lean, forward experience available to advertisers that provided so many rich signals, such as location, connection type, and handset, that has enabled them to inform their creative and targeting strategies to connect with their customers. First, it was display budget migrating from desktop to mobile to take advantage of the engagement opportunities made available to them in these rich and engaging HTML5 creatives. Now it's TV budgets that are migrating to mobile, as vertical video continues to illustrate its ability to deliver both viewability and addressability in ways linear TV is still trying to architect in the form of the OTT strategy. So as we move on and we start looking at mobile advertising environments, most advertisers we find who are new to this scene actually focus on mobile web, thinking that it's going to be performing just like a desktop environment. Now, whilst this is true for brand awareness campaigns, where success is measured by reach and brand lift, advertisers who are focused on driving actions, so in performance campaigns, for example, quickly realize that using cost per acquisition, or CPA, as a primary campaign measurement is much, much harder, because, for example, Apple iOS Safari browsers don't support third-party cookies by default, and they're not the only ones. And this can dramatically impact targeting and attribution, depending on the audience they're actually trying to reach. So, the next thing that people look at is responsive websites. And these kind of websites maintain the integrity of the ad creative by resizing it to fit each screen. Now, this is assuming that the ad tech provider can actually provide responsive ads that go with the responsive site, which is starting to come to the fore, but is much less common. And now this ensures that the ad appears exactly as designed, which creates a good consumer experience and simplifies the content management process for the publisher. So while this works reasonably well for desktops and tablets, as they share, or they often share, similar page aspect ratios, and a lot of the content can be on the screen at the same time, for mobile phones, the experience may not be as good, since it's difficult to know in advance where the ad will actually appear. For example, an ad that's designed to appear above the fold on a desktop page may be placed in a poorly visible spot at the very bottom of a mobile page, even though it's technically appearing at the end of the same content section. So expanding the bitstream data to identify which ad opportunities are best suited for specific devices or channels will make advertising on responsive sites far more predictable and ensure better consumer experiences. So moving on, into mobile app, we've seen that consumers in some markets spend the vast majority of their digital media type on a mobile device, consuming content within a mobile app. Now, this alone makes it imperative that advertisers figure out the best way to engage with their audiences while they're using a mobile app. Targeting app audiences requires the use of a mobile device ID, a device-specific, unique, resettable ID specifically for advertising. This is referred to as an identifier for advertising, or IDFA for Apple smartphone and tablet users, and a Google advertising ID, or an AAID for Android devices. So even though they've got different names, and we now seem to have gone into 4-letter acronyms rather than 3-letter acronyms, all the features, the encryption and technical details apply to both of those advertising IDs. So ads that appear inside a mobile app deliver a far better consumer experience than mobile web ads, since they load faster and are more responsive. This is important since mobile users are typically on task and not all that patient. I speak from personal experience on this, especially if they're waiting for an ad to load, and that's actually slowing down the content and slowing down the access to what they're trying to view. In-app ads are also rendered after the consumer has loaded a specific app screen where the ad will play, making them more viewable than web ads. So, one of the main issues we face is the challenge of attribution. And as consumer journeys become increasingly complex, with consumers jumping across devices, moving between digital and offline worlds more quickly than ever, research has found that 4 in 5 organizations use marketing attribution because of its crucial role in enabling them to make sense of the data generated by audiences. And what we've found is that the quality of the data is far more important than the efficiency of the models. As marketers spend lots of time figuring out the right attribution model without actually thinking about improving the data that goes in. Measuring all touch points used to be easy and accurate in a web-only environment through cookies. Touch points which happen in the same web browser could be easily tracked. However, in today's cross-everything world, where most consumer behaviors are cross-browser, cross-device, cross-web, cross-app, it's much more of a challenge. And attribution, as I said before, is only as good as the data that is used. So if measurement isn't cross-device, then assumptions are made about consumer conversions, attributing more credit to other channels and potentially undervaluing or even overvaluing the role of mobile media. So training is the key element to this. Proving the value of marketing attribution requires clean data as well as accurate modeling and skilled analysts. This is a stumbling block for almost 60% of companies who say that they don't action the insights they get from attribution. Now, a key reason is a lack of attribution skill set and knowledge within marketing teams. This is why many organizations rely on external partners and vendors for the end-to-end execution of marketing attribution. And this does not replace the need for strong in-house knowledge in order to be able to review, interpret, and then action the findings. So, moving on that, what we're seeing is what companies seem to understand is the kind of technical challenges and the solutions that they can find. So what we see is there are generally 2 categories of models that you can use for attribution. Rules-based models versus calculated or statistical models. So the former is typically based on assumptions, so it can be vastly biased, while the latter learns from historical data and dynamically defines the credit allocation. Many organizations are lagging behind when it comes to more complex models, with 48% still using last-click models. Now, when it comes to the multi-channel consumer customer journey, companies need to unify both their data and their technology in order to develop insightful attribution models. And measuring incrementally enables marketers to measure success by comparing metrics for an audience exposed to an ad campaign or channel to the metrics for an audience not exposed to the ad campaign or channel. Now, when the exposed group outperforms the control group, the difference in performance can be described as an incremental lift, providing key insight for marketers. The incremental results can then be used to calibrate rules-based or statistical models to make sure that the attribution model reflects incrementality instead of just correlation. Now, for the dinosaurs in the room, such as myself, who grew up on marketing, on direct marketing and sending out mailings, this is exactly the same as A/B testing was back in the day. It's not because we're using different types of attribution models, different types of platforms, that the basic concepts of measuring impacts of marketing should change. So bear this in mind when a vendor is approaching you with a new solution which is shinier and brighter than the last one. So next on is we're looking at creativity, which is a subject which is particularly close to my heart. And we really wanted to move away from disruptive formats, because finding the right format for consumers is a critical component in an effective programmatic strategy. Picking the format is part of a larger viewpoint in mobile when in consideration with user experience, data, and content. Now, there are many traditional formats that are the baseline for the current mobile market that revolve around variations with the traditional banner format. However, the choice of what creative to use with mobile ads should be viewed through the challenges between publisher and user experience. So we've looked at research that shows that when a user accidentally clicks on a mobile ad, over 2/3 of them feel annoyed, which is obviously not the way you want a consumer to be feeling about a brand. But worse, almost half feel frustrated, and 22% actually feel angry about the experience that they've just undergone. So the golden rule in mobile is to enhance, not to disrupt, the user experience. Although dynamic creative might appear more likely to increase user engagement, sometimes the big impact option can interrupt the user experience, leading to a less than desirable effect. For instance, formats such as interstitials and autoplay video not only pop up at inconvenient intervals, but can also consume high levels of data, which often results in the consumer making a quick exit from the website. The solution is for publishers to seek to incorporate ads within the user experience. So looking at this, native ads offer a simple, scalable solution if done right, for example, amongst other kinds of formats. IAB Europe defines native distribution ad formats as ad units used for the automated distribution of content at scale and that align to the style and format of the surrounding environment. The most typical or well-known for mobile being the in-feed ad unit. Taking into consideration the IAB Europe Native Advertising and Content Marketing White Paper, it's important to consider the following points for delivering native advertising on mobile. So firstly, form. How does the ad fit with the overall page design? Is it in the viewer's activity stream, or is it not in the stream? Function. Does the ad function like the other elements on the page in which it is placed? Does it deliver the same type of content experience? For example, is it a video on a video page, or is it a story among stories, or is it different? And does that difference actually add to the value, or withdraw from it? Thirdly, integration. How well do the ad unit's behaviors align with those of the surrounding content? Are they the same? For example, are they linking to the on-site story page, or are new ones introduced? And finally, disclosure. Is it obvious? Is the disclosure clear and prominent? Now, this is especially important for mobile because these elements should be considered with the critical goal, the user experience. And you can look at this through a simple prism. For example, who is the audience? What are they actually trying to achieve? What is the goal of them being in the app or on the site? Is it to see quick information or long form? And then what's the goal of the content itself? Where do they use the app or the site? Is it a transactional process, or is it for entertainment or for another reason? And when do they use this app? I mean, what are the user stories with your core audience? What does that tell you about their habits? So, all in all, as mentioned at the start, the execution of programmatic mobile is not as straightforward as it is on desktop. But the proper application of attribution model and the efficient use of data and the focus on user experience can lead to some very high return on investment.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Andrew. And just as a reminder, please do submit your questions through the question and answer section on the screen of your WebEx. I have a question for you, Andrew. You made a really good point. So new technology doesn't mean that the rules of marketing have changed, but there are some key elements that have changed, aren't there? Location data, for example. Is there anything more you can add on that?
Yeah, I think so. The main point was that the underlying rules haven't changed, but we can play along with the new technologies that come along and use them to our advantage. So it's not because the basis hasn't changed that. So I'm just kind of repeating what I'm going to say there. But if we take into account the new elements that come on board, so location data, we've got better access to socio-demographic data. We've got a lot more ways of interpreting the information that comes through, and we can use that more to our advantage. It's far more efficient and far more scalable than trying to get the return from a direct mailing sent out by paper. And we can use that to feed back more efficiently into the marketing process and learn from that feedback more effectively and pretty much in real time. And I think it's very much when we take that into consideration that we need to remember that we should always go back to basics and remember our 4 Ps in Marketing 101. And we're actually there to kind of test and learn and execute going forward. So it's not because there is more data in higher quantities coming at you faster from many different areas that you should become overwhelmed and let others take the decisions for you.
Excellent. So the fundamentals of marketing stay the same, the fundamental rules stay the same, but there's more information to work with.
Yes.
And what about creativity? So it was very interesting to see the statistics there on how we might be irritating consumers and damaging the brand. I know creativity is something that you're passionate about. Do you have any guidelines for non-interruptive creative?
Yeah, it's a very simple guideline. It's kind of give priority to the content. It's odd that I find myself saying this because I've been selling advertising on the internet for 20 years and always assumed that consumers would go onto the internet to see the advertising, but actually they're there for the content. And the best something that we're trying to do as well is just trying to figure out what is the best way to let a consumer know that there is advertising there that could be relevant to them, but is not getting in the way of their content. So, given the minuscule real estate that there is on a mobile, that involves clever play with either movement on the page or icons or interplay with ads that appear quickly and then disappear, giving precedence to the content. And as with everything, it's test and learn. Like try a format, learn from the feedback, modify one piece, learn from the feedback that comes on and keep going.
Okay, excellent. And certainly the more you learn, the better we can improve the experience for the consumers and improve the advertising experience as well. Excellent. I don't think there are any questions coming through on the WebEx. So with that, it just remains for me to thank Andrew and to thank Josie for their contributions this afternoon. We'll break slightly early and we'll be back in 14 minutes' time for the second half of the afternoon. Okay, welcome back from the break, everybody. So into the final countdown now with the panel that we've all been waiting for this afternoon. So we've heard a lot about programmatic advertising today. We've learned about use of data, growth of mobile, the growth of how to sell advertising, how to buy programmatic advertising. Clearly, programmatic advertising is growing. Ad spend is increasing overall across Europe, and the share of ad spend traded programmatically is also growing. We're now at the point where more than half of the internet ad spend is traded programmatically. And yet, in the US, eMarketer predicts that programmatic advertising will be, by the end of 2019, 4 out of every 5 US digital display dollars. So I thought it'd be interesting to look at the comparison with Europe and how different countries in Europe are growing programmatically in the future and what's next for programmatic. I'm joined by 4 experts. Earlier on today we heard from Andrew Buckman. He is the MD for EMEA of Sublime Skins, and he's the former MD EMEA at OpenX. He was the COO of Trade Doubler before that. Welcome, Andrew. Welcome back.
Thank you.
We also have Phil Duffield, who's on the line today. He's the MD of the Advertising Cloud at Adobe. Hello, Phil.
Hello.
So Phil has worked at Adobe. Before that, he worked in San Francisco for Samba TV, and he's worked at a range of other innovative companies. For 4 years, he was at Adapt TV and AOL, and he was the MD of Ad2One before that. And he also brings expertise from Australia, having worked in Sydney before. So thank you, Phil.
Cool.
Next up, we have Tom Mills. So Tom has spent the past year and a half as Global Head of Client Operations at AppyPerse. This followed a stint heading up the programmatic engagement team at Havas. Prior to that, he worked at iProspect, at Digitas LBI, and at Dennis Optimedia. He has a history degree, which makes him primed to predict the future. Hello, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, Dan Watson is the Digital Director of CARA. This is a role he's had for 15 months, which follows 2 years as Head of Digital EMEA for the G14 at Prior to that, he worked at Say Media, Microsoft, Mindshare, and started his career at CARA. So, hello, Dan. Thank you for joining.
Hello. I've been at CARA 3 years, actually.
So, clearly, programmatic is set to grow across Europe. So let's look at what's driving this growth. Is it technology? Is it new and emerging channels? Is it data? I think something interesting that Andrew raised is the role of creativity in the growth of programmatic. I think I've seen a lot of conferences where creativity is discussed and programmatic creativity. Tom, what is your thoughts on that topic?
In its purest sense, programmatic is the use of data and technology to deliver a marketing goal. We've made huge strides in the area of buying technology and using amazing learnings to refine our campaign strategy. But we're still developing in the area of creativity, and common practice is still to use sort of HTML5 banners after we've put together a really sophisticated campaign strategy, and then we get to the point of execution when we're just using ad placements which have been in place for the last 15, 20 years. It's an area which really excites me. I think there's some amazing work that's being done in the programmatic creative or DCO area, but I think it's an area that will improve next year, and I think to do that, there needs to be a greater collaboration from an early stage between creative and programmatic strategists, experts. Because effectively, we have all these wonderful learnings and touch points that we can engage with users, and that should be informing our creative strategy as well. And it's something that was the ethos of this building is that working in a village and putting media and creative closer together. So I think next year it's going to be something which I think we'll see move forward, and it's not just used by certain categories, airlines, betting companies, etc.
Okay, so it's sort of going to be more broad. And what about the role of data in that? Phil, online. So I saw your article covering this topic as well, harnessing data more effectively with the creative. Can you explain a bit more about that, please?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I agree with what Tom just said. Like, we have a big focus on creativity experiences over exposure, because if you look at the industry right now, it is fragmented. We have more data on our audience and our consumers than we've ever had before, but because it's so fragmented, it's still very difficult to cut through, and there's a ton of exposure out there. So what we're focusing on is creating experiences, and we do that because obviously the foundation of Adobe has been our creative platform. So to be able to introduce data as an overlay onto that through our DMP Audience Manager and Adobe Analytics, and then adding to that DCO and a DSP, you start harnessing creative data and programmatic in one solution, which is what we believe is going to be the future.
So that's the future, harnessing creative and programmatic and data in one place. But what about changing rules on the use of data? What about the GDPR and the e-privacy, Phil?
Yeah, well, I think as Adobe, we are very well positioned. We've obviously have to be very well ahead of GDPR on top of what we're doing as an organisation, and we are. So we just got to make sure that we communicate with our clients and our advertisers and our agency partners, so they know that we are on top of GDPR. And of course, it's going to bring changes to the industry. And I think the reality is, I don't think everyone in the industry is really aware of how much change GDPR is going to bring. And to be honest as well, I don't think everyone's as prepared for it as we are and other big businesses. So yeah, it's gonna change the way we have to treat data and treat our consumers, but I don't think it impacts our overall strategy.
So Dan, what do you think about data? I think there can be a sort of confusion that we heard from Josie earlier about great data strategies, but is data keeping programmatic in the world of performance and potentially holding back big brand budgets?
I don't think so personally. I think data is key to programmatic. Programmatic, I think what's holding it back is actually more about cost efficiency, which, while it's hugely important, I agree with Tom when he talks about the need for more creativity with programmatic and to move away from that. And data can only enhance that. It can only obviously make the targeting better and enable you to do more interesting things with it.
Okay, great. So better targeting, more interesting things. But do you use data across all of your clients and targeting?
Yes, and this GDPR comes into this because it's interesting about the shift from the use of third-party data to first-party data, and I think that is going to become more and more crucial for advertisers to own their own data. GDPR is clearly going to affect what we use at the moment in terms of third-party data, and so I think we'll see a lot more brands owning their own data and using their own data to greater effect.
Is there a need for greater scale, perhaps, to help programmatic grow in the future?
To greater scale of inventory or data? I think there's plenty of inventory. I think if anything, we're moving in the other direction with inventory, with the long tail kind of being lopped off in a lot of cases. In terms of data, yes, scale and quality within data is definitely needed, and perhaps something like blockchain will start to improve that, where we can start to verify the quality of the data that we're using.
Excellent. So what are the possibilities for blockchain in the future of programmatic? Is that something that you have been working on at Cara?
It's very early stages for blockchain, but it's certainly something we're thinking about.
Okay. Perhaps blockchain could be part of the future of programmatic then?
Oh, definitely. Oh, absolutely. I think it's fundamental to it.
Okay, great. So interesting that you raised the point of data and attribution. So Andrew was talking earlier about how a lot of companies find attribution is a problem, or they may have the data but they can't use it to the best effect. Andrew, I know you've also got thoughts on creativity and data and attribution. Do you think it's holding back the growth of programmatic?
Yes, I do. I think the interaction between brands and consumers and actually getting some kind of return on investment on advertising is tough at the moment. I think the lack of creativity in terms of the format that we use and the content that goes in those formats is part of that. It seems to be that a lot of creative formats are stuck in the let's just use a standard banner ad and just make it really, really small so it fits on the screen. And any attempts to expand from that to go with maybe interstitials, for example, I think that's probably one of the biggest things to try and expand on creativity gets punished by Google, for example, who have decried rather unilaterally that it's going to penalise user experience, and they are right to some extent, and it's something we need to counter. But there is a general lack of creativity in terms of what formats we can use. So I'd like to see more experimentation with either in-feed or in-app or native type advertising that we've got. Any kind of creativity that allows a user to be aware that there is advertising around and encourages them to engage with that advertising. When I grew up on advertising, there was extended stories over different, well, I didn't have internet when I grew up, but over different TV breaks. And then you'd follow an ad, and you wouldn't actually have any kind of call to action in the first couple of ads that came along, and you just follow a series of it, and you were engaged with the next ad as it came down the line because you were intrigued as a consumer to find out what was going on. There's none of that in online advertising today. There is no story that thinks it's time to lay itself out and to move on.
And why is that?
Because there is no universal metric to measure the impact on a brand of internet advertising. the only metric that everyone can agree on today is click-through rate. And that is not an appropriate metric to measure brand advertising. And people will measure, and I was talking earlier on, just in the previous presentation, about not straying from traditional marketing methods of A/B testing and test and learn. People test and learn by measuring the click-through rate for an individual banner, rather than actually looking at the engagement rate of a full campaign.
So, what will be the role of measurement? Will you see, do we need innovations in measurement for there to be more money to flow into programmatic advertising across Europe, or innovations that will increase the inflow of advertising money?
Yes, we need innovation in measurement so that, and this is where I think the IAB can play a massive role, so that everyone agrees on actually how do we measure the effectiveness of a brand campaign. We've been talking about brand KPIs for a long time. We've yet to kind of come to an agreement.
So, Dan, did you have a thought on that?
Yeah, that's on the KPIs, more just back to the creative thoughts. I agree on this, and I think a lot of the problem is the history of advertising and production budgets, and we come from creating a TV ad, which costs a lot of money, but reaches a huge amount of people, and that balance of production and media was always quite comfortable. We're now at a stage where we reach a segments of people across different devices, different states of mind, and you need to address each in a personal way with a different creative depending on the device and in the kind of mood they're in. Now that requires investment, and significant production investment, and it swings that balance between production and media. And I think people aren't comfortable with that yet, that perhaps you need to spend a lot more on production. But to get that connection out of it at the end, there will be a better result.
And do we need to improve the measurement and the attribution metrics to prove that that investment was worth it in the beginning?
Yes, but they need to come away from clicks. As we talked about, it's not a measurement. We need to be measuring engagement and favorability and those kind of classic brand lift measurements, and also through MMM, to studies to work out what the impact is on sales. That's the ultimate goal.
And will that bring in more brand budgets? You spoke to me about the improved use of context to bring in more brand budgets.
Sorry. Yeah, I think definitely that's part of it. At the moment, like I say, we are guilty of taking offline assets and putting them online cost efficiently through programmatic, and there's more we can do. We can obviously create better experiences, and we know that's what people want because they're downloading ad blockers to say, I don't want what you're giving me now.
A more seamless advertising experience, better measured, more in context with the environment.
You summed it up very well.
And I think you raised an interesting point there in terms of use of offline assets for online campaigns. And that there's big frustration from the publisher side and from the vendor side and people who measure this to say, well, why don't brands and agencies realise that a 30-second TV ad is not appropriate for a pre-roll or a mid-roll for a 45-second video? But there's this kind of lack of communication and understanding between the two sides, because of course agencies realise that that's not appropriate. It's just like the only asset they actually have, because the return on investment hasn't been proven that it's actually worthwhile creating a 6-second ad or an 8-second ad or a 12-second ad, and everything that entails and all the testing that goes around that for what's as yet an unknown quantity.
I think actually right. I think I used to be a sort of a TV buyer many moons ago, to move through the process of sort of following sort of video assets onto online, and it was always the norm just to repurpose that 30-second ad. But I think something we're desperately trying to evangelise is that use of smaller ads, because effectively I think Facebook call it the 3-second thumb audition now. You've got 3 seconds to engage with someone, and I think serving a piece of video content in a native environment is great, but it has to be done, and it has to be made to the point, because effectively we're doing a value exchange. A user is wanting to watch some content, but but we need to ensure that it's not, the ad is longer than the content. So I think that there is a point from a media buying perspective as well, is that we're using the ads and the length where they're available for the right strategies, rather than putting a 60-second amazing piece of creative over someone who's then going to watch a 30-second Top Gear.
And ads are shrinking. We know there was a recent study that showed that for the first time, the 30-second ad is not the majority used time length on US TV. So it's now only kind of 49%, and it's 20 seconds and 10 seconds, and even these 6-second bumpers that are starting to eat into that. So we know, time lengths are getting smaller, and advertisers need to create these shorter time lengths that are more suitable for the environment.
So advertising is shrinking in length. Adapting. It's shrinking in length of exposure. So adapting. I think so. Andrew, you've talked about 6-second ads, 8-second ads. Tom, you've talked about 3-second thumb-stopping ads, I think, and Dan, you're talking about different types of advertising lengths for different environments. So we're all talking about video. Phil, I know that you're an expert on video, you work at Adobe Advertising Cloud now, at Samba TV, AOL TV before. What do you think about the different lengths of video advertising and how this will play out in the future?
Yeah, I think it's I've just been listening intently to this conversation, and I agree with some of it and not with all of it. I think, I think attribution is holding programmatic back a little bit, but not a huge amount. Like when I was at AOL, we acquired a multi-touch attribution tool, and the take up from a direct brand perspective was challenging for us as a business, because A, it's expensive, and B, it's a big job to get the multi-touch attribution tool across the business and do it seamlessly. And then once you've done that, you have to then use that data and integrate it into a DSP or a technology to help them make smarter decisions based on their return on investment, based on their sales or their revenue. So I don't think it's holding the programmatic space back a lot, but I mean, it's definitely an interesting space, and I think attribution is a topic that's becoming more and more prevalent as we move into FY18. I think from a video perspective, I think the industry moving to shorter ads is actually going to help the industry grow and see more investment. As I said earlier, it's about creating experiences, and we've been overexposing consumers to ads for way too long, and I think it was Dan that said, the growth of ad blockers is going through the roof, and that's because we've been exposing all these ads for far too long. So, creating digital experiences and utilising creative and making sure that, we are giving the right message in the right environment, using the right creative is going to become more and more important. And that, if that means with the shorter video, then so be it. So I think it actually is going to fuel more growth in FY18.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So shorter, maybe different length adverts will deliver more investment, but specifically talking about video now, of course, which has grown by 155% according to the IAB EU research that we heard about earlier on today. What about other channels that will grow and emerge in the coming years? Let's talk about that for a few minutes. Tom, Dan, what about the growth of audio advertising in programmatic?
Audio really excites me. It allows us to engage with people in a way in which we've never been able to do before. We can have a conversation with someone based on their emotions and the content they're listening to. And some of the work that we've been looking at is how we can share a message with someone based on their location, based on what they're listening to, and based on the time of the year. If it's you're in Brixton, it's 7 o'clock in the morning, it's Monday, it's January, it's raining. It's one amazing opportunity to serve an ad about a flight to a distant location where it's currently 39 degrees or something like that. So I think it gives us it gives us the opportunity to tell stories as well. And we were talking about that with the piece up front about DCO and actually doing some sort of optimized creative around audio. It's just the opportunities for advertisers is endless. But as with the other things we're talking about, you have production costs, you have setup costs. There are blockers that will prevent these amazing stories being told. I think the infrastructure and the technology and the data is in place, and I think the education around it is there. But a full-scale rollout, I think there are things holding it back, and the audio partners are trying to break down those barriers. But we've done some great work with it. We're using it as incremental reach in some way. I work in Germany, which is great. Coming from a video background, everyone used to talk about the holy grail of incremental reach on TV and video, and it's great to see that that's being extended into other traditional medias, and also in the likes of the Netherlands and the UK. So it's an area which is growing really fast, and I think has got an amazing opportunity. But I think it does need to be baby steps rather than a full-on run.
Dan, what's your prediction for programmatic audio over the next couple of years?
Well, it's fascinating because for the first time you're seeing audio and video separating in advertising. Well, the first time in a long time. We obviously had TV where they went together, and what we're finding with digital is sound is usually off. And we have subtitles and things like that instead. And so this is a fascinating way to bring audio triggers back in. And the example that Tom gave there of a dark, cloudy, rainy day, and you've got kind of the noise of the beach and the seagulls. It's a wonderful story. I do think it will grow. I think what's really going to grow it is obviously the rise of the voice assistants, Google Home and Amazon Alexa, and exactly how they fit in and how adverts will fit in on those, and how prepared people will be to accept adverts from there.
I think you raise a really good point there. Voice is so interesting. Interesting to see the growth of Spotify, the digital audio exchange, and it will only grow. Of course, it also has an impact on OTT, I would say. I love the idea of linking Amazon Alexa to the Fire Stick. What do you think, panelists, about OTT, the growth of programmatic OTT? Dan? Tom?
I think at the moment, I guess it's that missing link between video and programmatic TV. My wife and I, we watch all our content through a PlayStation, so we're changing the way in which we're consuming now. Obviously, we're a finite group in here. We're all in the marketing industry, but I think you look at some of the. I think the study that you guys did was 825 million euros is predicted for 2020 in OTT, which is incredible. So, programmatic TV in its purest sense, I think we're a way off. I think there are some barriers, but the OTT really helps to fill that void at the moment, because people are consuming content on YouTube, on smart TV. They are using apps. And increasingly, they are watching by different sources. Via the PlayStation, we've got access to YouTube, we've got access to Sky. The opportunities there of linking up. So I think, and from an advertising point of view, it's something which we have really embraced over the past few months, and it's sort of come at us. As inventory within Europe has opened up quite considerably. I think it's again an area that's developing, and there isn't a finite pool, but I think it really is helping us as digital marketeers to serve a digital message into someone's living room.
Yeah, I agree. So it's literally a lean-back environment where people are engaged. It gives the opportunity for the creative to be full screen. It's certainly something that you're an expert in as well, Andrew.
Yeah, very much so. It's I think the opportunities that are presented by OTTs that go forward are immense. I think you've got a captive audience, as it were, who are who are used to interacting with advertising in that environment, who associate a screen in their living room with ads coming on there on a regular basis, even in an intrusive format. So as you see with kind of pre-recorded shows and TiVo type shows, that there's more and more skipping of those ads. So another format of ads, a non-intrusive format of ads that comes along and interacts with the content, interacts with the format in which the content is delivered, I think could be really impactful.
And the survey you referred to there, Tom, shows that there's a huge difference across Europe. We surveyed the big 5 markets and found that the UK, France and Germany are quite ahead, as you spoke about as well, but also Spain and Italy, there seems to be a huge, as yet untapped opportunity there for connected television specifically. Phil, I know this is an area that you're an expert in as well, and you were talking to me about IPTV and the growth of OTT. What's your thoughts on this for the future?
Yeah, I agree with everyone else. I think OTT is going to be huge. It's going to be huge for us as a business as well. You and I discussed about what was happening in France specifically around like IPTV, and a lot of our clients in France, we drive a lot of business for them across IPTV, and they've been, industry drivers, I would say, in that space. And the interesting piece is the demand that we're seeing in France for that. I think the supply right now currently outstrips demand in the French market, which is a problem for the digital publishers because it makes up something like 50% of their inventory. So it's an interesting area, IPTV. I think you're going to see in France, it will continue to grow for the next year. And I think OTT, as I said, we're putting big bets on OTT as we believe that we're going to see significant growth in that space. But I think it's like, the opportunity to bring that all together, bring OTT together with search and display and video, and to then overlay that with data to then make the experience a much better one for consumers.
Excellent, thank you. So while we're on the subject of other areas, other media channels that we expect will be big in programmatic in the future, let's run through some others. How about out of home? What do you guys predict for programmatic out of home? Anyone?
So I'll take the initial one. So there are some interesting companies coming out there. So interesting enablers. One example is a French company called Displays, which is quite an interesting play on words for a French company. And it's all about the programmatic integration of digital out of home. And so they are looking at the availability of that inventory very much as a traditional, you can call traditional internet sales, a traditional media agency would. It's like it's making that available to agency trading desks to be able to trade programmatically through an SSP or a DSP.
Interesting. And Tom, you had an example of another channel in another country that's emerging in the programmatic field.
Yeah, probably the least likely programmatic medium is programmatic print. Our colleagues in Denmark were talking about the JP Polykin Hus. Actually, I said that's correct. They have now launched a programmatic buying platform, which effectively allows media planners and buyers to buy their ads in a similar sort of way to which they would their programmatic video displays through private deals. There's a fixed price in terms between publisher and agency. There's a real-time auction, so following that traditional auction model. You can do a request for a proposal, and then you can also underbid, which allows you to be there on standby terms. We were talking about this before. It's not obviously a real-time display of an ad, but it is an automating a process which I think in that market we're seeing a significant reduction in investment, not because of the nature of press, because it plays a great role in driving reach and awareness, and has played a significant role the last couple of hundred years. But what I was finding was efficiency in the actual buying and creating ads. So it's amazing that we're now sort of talking about these different
Different channels.
Yeah.
Different channels. And Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think this is a perfect example of what is next for programmatic in Europe, is that what's next is the word programmatic can go away. Because what we're talking about here is trading, and using machines to trade advertising. It doesn't matter if that's in real time or if it's to trade at any time before a certain given deadline before it has to go to print. Using machines to actually help with the decisioning process of that is the definition of programmatic. And we will get to a stage where all of media is traded using machines to make the decision, so there's no point in saying programmatic. I was painfully reminded this morning that when I first got into this business, this used to be called new media, and it's no longer new media, and I think it's no longer going to be programmatic pretty soon.
Interesting. And Dan, what would be your big bet, either channel or prediction between now and 2020 for the future of programmatic?
Well, I'll give you two. A short term, and if there is such a thing in media, a long term, because everything comes so quickly. Machine learning. And I think the way we trade programmatically with improved strategies, but more and quicker to get to better targeting. And the other one's connected devices. And it's interesting, I noted this week that Amazon is now the most widely used DSP, that AAP is used by more people than use DBM, which is frightening, and then add in the data that's pouring off our fridges and our Alexas and things like this, and we start to have some very, very interesting data points when we know we're running out of food and toilet paper and dishwasher tablets.
Excellent. Okay, so everything connected in the future and no more programmatic. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much to all the panellists this afternoon, to Tom Mills, to Dan Watson, to Andrew Buckman and Phil Duffield. I think what we've learned is there's a huge role for improvement in creative optimization, applying data and the learnings from that to improve the creative experience for the user. Also, some way to go in measurement that could lead to an influx of programmatic advertising euros, and an improvement in attribution could help that too. Not sure we came to an agreement on the ideal length for creative, but maybe that's because it's a environment by environment situation. But what's clear is that programmatic is set to grow across Europe, different rates in different countries and different media, but to grow for sure, to a point where very soon there will be no programmatic, just machines trading with each other. I think you summarised perfectly, Andrew. So thank you very much for participating. Now, and thank you very much to all the speakers from today's virtual event, and also to our hosts, and of course the IAB Europe, especially Marie-Claire and Alison Fenner. I want to remind you all there are two white papers that are available from the IAB Europe that we've been talking about today. One is the Using Data Effectively paper, and the other is the Programmatic Mobile paper. Very interesting research, and both available on the IAB Europe's website. And finally, it just remains for me to hand back to Simon Cowsted, who is chair of this committee, to close out today's event.
Thanks, Joanne, and thanks everybody, both in the room and on the phone. There's a couple of things just to call out. First of all, amazing time and effort given by the speakers from work done by the committee, or fresh work done, great discussion, terrifying thought about my fridge influencing my media, but I like it a lot. I'm just going to be careful what I put in the fridge this evening. I think we've touched on a lot of the issues that face the whole industry today, and I think it's great to see some of the optimism and opportunity in the future from this afternoon's session, particularly with being careful around the use of data, still the growth and expansion that exists as an opportunity for us, and also recognising some of those steps that are underway to try and improve some of the issues that we're seeing called out by research. So you'll continue to see a great load of resources and research being made available via IAB Europe. I'd like to call out just a couple of these resources. Please do visit the IAB Europe website. These are all downloadable and accessible, but through the course of this year we've released in September their programmatic market sizing, the key considerations for a buy-side programmatic strategy, really fascinating cross-party group work around transparency and the questions to ask within the media supply chain, and the programmatic mobile white paper, how to use data effectively. We continue to try and drive as a group, and it's everyone giving time to add value to the industry and help us all grow. And so that's really essential, but also we look to do more events. So if there's things you want to hear about from the IAB, please get in touch. If you're not a member of the IAB, please join. Seriously, it's important for all of us to help the industry grow and be successful. And I want to highlight a couple of upcoming things that we have coming. We've talked a lot about video, so it'd be great for people to participate in this study. It's open for another week, week and a day, which is the attitude to digital video adoption. So please participate and give us your opinions of what's going to help drive forward video growth. They're also very keen to announce that the IAB annual conference is moving to Milan next year, which is lovely. It'll be warmer than Amsterdam, although Amsterdam is also lovely for any Dutch people on the phone. But that will be in May next year. More details are available online, but it's a great opportunity. Some great thought leadership is offered at that event. And at that event, we also celebrate some awards, and there's an opportunity to participate and promote great research and great digital activation in the Mix Awards as well. So please, my final ask is, I hope you have found value today. We'll work on how to make these things more effective. So we do welcome feedback. I know some audio challenges, as there always are in these environments, but really let us know what you'd like to see if we think about doing this event again in the future. And beyond all else, I would really like to thank Marie-Claire, Alison Tenner at IAB, and the whole team, particularly the moderators, Ollie this morning and Joanna this afternoon. So I hope it's helped everyone feel better and know more about the industry, and I look forward to the next time we do this. Have a good afternoon. Bye.